AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she stole from me. I, 28M, have a sister, Lily, 26F, and we've always had a bit of a complicated relationship. We grew up in a small house, and as kids, we fought a lot over everything. Clothes, toys, who got the bigger slice of cake, etc. But as we got older, things started to smooth out. We both went off to college and stayed somewhat in touch, but it wasn't until a few years ago that we really started reconnecting. A couple of months ago, Lily hit a rough patch. She had been living with her boyfriend, but they broke up and she was struggling to find a new place to live. She called me up one night, asking if she could stay with me for a while. At first, I hesitated. I had my own place and didn't want to disrupt my life too much, but Lily convinced me that it would only be for a couple of weeks, just long enough for her to get back on her feet. So I agreed. I thought it would be a good way to help her out, and maybe we'd even bond a little more. She moved in, and things were fine at first. She seemed really grateful and kept to herself for the most part. But about 2 weeks into her stay, I started noticing some weird things happening around the house. Small things at first, like a pair of headphones that had gone missing or a bottle of my favorite whiskey that was half empty when I knew I hadn't touched it. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. But then, one day, I came home from work and found that a few items of mine were missing. A few high-end electronics that I had been saving up for, and a couple of pieces of jewelry that I'd inherited from my grandmother. I was absolutely devastated. I checked all the usual places, even retraced my steps, but there was no denying it. They were gone. At first, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I went over it in my head over and over, but there was no way someone could have gotten in without me noticing. The only person who had been in the house was Lily. I felt sick to my stomach. So, I confronted her. I didn't accuse her outright, but asked if she had seen anything happen to my stuff, just to feel her out. She immediately got defensive. She told me I was being paranoid and accused me of not trusting her. I tried to stay calm and explained that I wasn't accusing her directly, but she could tell something was off. Her reaction made me even more suspicious, so I asked her point blank if she had taken anything. She insisted she hadn't, and I was just imagining things. I didn't buy it, but I didn't press further. The next few days were awkward, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells. I started locking up more of my things and kept a closer eye on what was happening around the house. I didn't want to accuse her without concrete proof, but I also knew something wasn't right. Then, a week later, I came home to find a pawn shop receipt on the kitchen counter. It was for a few of the items that had gone missing. My heart sank. I immediately called the pawn shop, and they confirmed that my items had been sold to them by someone matching Lily's description. I was furious. I didn't know how to process it. I confronted her again, and this time she couldn't deny it. She broke down and admitted that she had taken my things to try and get some quick cash. She said she was sorry, but that she didn't know what else to do since she wasn't able to find a job quickly enough and felt like she was running out of options. I was heartbroken. It wasn't about the money or the items, though losing them sucked. It was the betrayal. She had crossed a line that I didn't think she ever would. I've always been there for her, even when we were kids and had our fights. But this was different. I told her she needed to leave. I couldn't have someone in my house who would steal from me, no matter the circumstances. She begged me to let her stay, saying she had nowhere else to go, but I stood firm. She left the next day, and since then, we haven't spoken much. Now, my family is mad at me. They think I should have been more understanding, that it was just a mistake and she didn't mean any harm. They're telling me I should have helped her out more, maybe even given her a second chance. But I feel betrayed, and I don't think I can ever trust her again. I'm feeling conflicted, though. I'm not sure if I did the right thing. Part of me feels like I should have been more empathetic, like I could have handled it better. But another part of me thinks I did what I had to do to protect myself. Am I the asshole for kicking her out and refusing to let her stay with me again? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and motivates me to create even more amazing content just for you. Make sure to turn on notifications so you'll never miss out on a new video. I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your support. It truly helps the channel grow. AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my house after he sold his. I, 29F, have a brother, David, 31M, who has always been somewhat of a free spirit. Growing up, he was the one who would skip school to go skateboarding or would leave his part-time job early to meet friends. Our parents always seemed to give him a lot of leeway with his choices, while I, being the older sibling, was expected to be more responsible. This created a bit of tension between us, but we always remained close. David moved out of our family home when he was 20. He rented a few places, lived in a couple of cities, and at one point even tried to live in a van. He eventually settled in a nice house that he bought a few years ago. At that point, I thought maybe he'd finally settled down and figure things out. He even talked about future plans, maybe starting a family, getting a dog, all that adult stuff. But then, last month, I received a call from him that completely threw me off. He told me that he had sold his house. No warning, no explanation, just that he sold it because he wasn't happy there anymore. I asked him where he was going to live, and he said he was just going to figure it out. I was concerned, but he reassured me that he had some money saved up and would be fine. A week later, David called again. This time, he was much more frantic. He told me that he had no place to stay, had run out of options, and had been staying with a friend for the past few days. He said that he didn't want to keep imposing on his friend, so he was hoping I could help him out. He asked if he could move in with me for a while until he figured things out. Now, I know that family helps family, but this caught me off guard. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment that I barely manage to keep tidy, and I'm already juggling a full-time job and trying to maintain a social life. My apartment is small, and I've never lived with anyone since I moved out of our parents' house. I value my space and privacy, and the thought of someone staying with me long-term felt overwhelming. I told David I wasn't sure it would work, but I needed to think about it. He got a bit upset, saying that he didn't want to be a burden, but had no other choice. I understand that he was desperate, but I also didn't want to sacrifice my mental and emotional well-being for the sake of being a good sister. The next day, I called him back and explained that I just didn't think it was a good idea. I told him that I wasn't in a position to have him living with me, especially after he had made a decision to sell his house without any backup plan. I suggested he look into getting a temporary rental, maybe an Airbnb or a short-term lease. He could stay with his friends for a bit longer while he figured out his next steps. David didn't take this well at all. He was furious and accused me of being selfish and not supporting him. He said that it wasn't like I had kids or a family to take care of, so I should be able to help him out. He said that I was acting like I didn't care about him, and that if the roles were reversed, he'd take me in without a second thought. He even went so far as to say that I was just like everyone else in the family, always expecting him to handle his problems on his own, but never offering help when he needed it most. To say that I was hurt by his reaction would be an understatement. I've always tried to support David in my own way, but it's not like I have an endless supply of resources or energy. I know he's been through a lot, and I know that he struggles with stability, but I can't let him dictate the terms of my life just because he's having a tough time. I can't put my own needs on the back burner for him, especially when I've been managing just fine on my own. A few days later, our mom called me. She told me that David was really upset and that I should reconsider my decision. She said I was being too harsh and that families should stick together in times like this. She also pointed out that I've always been more independent than David, and maybe I didn't fully understand how he was feeling. I didn't know how to respond to her, so I just told her that I made my decision and I wasn't going to change my mind. She didn't argue with me further, but I could tell she was disappointed. Now, David is no longer speaking to me. I haven't heard from him in over a week, and it's like I don't even exist to him anymore. I've tried texting him to check in, but he hasn't responded. Our parents are also upset with me, but they haven't said much beyond the initial conversation with my mom. I keep going back and forth in my head, wondering if I was too harsh on him. Did I do the right thing? I know that he made some questionable decisions, but he's still my brother. Should I have sucked it up and let him move in, even though it would have been really uncomfortable for me? Or is he the one who messed up by selling his house without a plan, and it's not my responsibility to pick up the pieces? So, AITA for refusing to let my brother move in after he sold his house. AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she called my house filthy and unlivable. So, I, 28F, have a younger sister, Emma, 24F, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. We get along most of the time, but she can be really judgmental and opinionated. I've always been the more independent one, and Emma has been the one who's always had things handed to her on a silver platter, courtesy of our parents. While I was working my way through college with part-time jobs and struggling to make ends meet, Emma was living at home, going on vacations with our parents, and generally had a very easy life. She's also always been the type to point out what she perceives as flaws in other people's lives. I've had my own apartment for the past 2 years. I'm proud of it, even though it's not perfect. It's a small one-bedroom apartment, but it's cozy, and I keep it clean. I don't have a lot of money, but I make do. I live in a busy part of the city, so it's convenient for work and friends. The apartment is also in a slightly older building, so yeah, it's not exactly the most pristine place in the world, but it's mine. I do my best to maintain it and keep it safe and livable. A few months ago, Emma called me out of the blue and asked if she could come visit for a few days. She said she had some time off work and wanted a change of scenery. I agree, of course, and told her she could stay in my guest room. I wasn't exactly thrilled because it's not the kind of place that's easy to entertain guests, but she's family, so I figured I'd make it work. When Emma arrived, things started off fine. She complimented me on my place and told me it was cute. But about an hour into her stay, she started commenting on little things. "It's kind of dark in here, isn't it?" she said, glancing around. And wow, this place really could use a deep clean. I brushed it off, thinking she was just being overly critical. The next day, Emma started getting more vocal about how much she disliked the apartment. She complained about the smell of the old carpet and how everything feels kind of dingy. She made it clear that my apartment was a far cry from the pristine, newly renovated places she was used to. At one point, she even asked if I could just clean the bathroom because it looked like it hadn't been touched in weeks. I told her I'd clean it later, but I felt a bit defensive. I clean my apartment when I can, but with my job and everything, it's not always spotless. After a couple of days of snide remarks, I finally snapped. I was already feeling the pressure of hosting someone in a small space, and her comments about my home were really starting to get to me. I told her that if she didn't like my apartment, she was welcome to stay somewhere else. Emma's face immediately changed, and she got all quiet. She said, "Well, I wasn't trying to be rude, but you have to admit this place is kind of a mess." I told her that she didn't have to stay, and I wasn't going to apologize for living the way I do. I told her that if she thought my apartment was unlivable, she didn't have to stay another second. She got up, packed her things, and left. I didn't hear from her for a few days. Then my mom called and started lecturing me about how I was being unreasonable. She told me that Emma was just trying to help by offering her opinion and that I shouldn't be so defensive. My mom said that Emma was just trying to improve my living situation and I should appreciate the effort. She also said that it was ungrateful of me to kick Emma out like that. I felt a little guilty, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in the right. I worked hard for my apartment, and while it might not be perfect, I don't need to hear constant criticism about how it looks. I told my mom that I didn't want to feel like I had to justify how I live. She said I was being stubborn and that I needed to grow up and accept criticism. I've since gotten a few more texts from Emma, but she's mostly been passive-aggressive, saying things like, "I guess I'll just stay in nicer places next time," or "I didn't know you were so sensitive about your apartment." I haven't responded to her, and I honestly don't feel like I need to. Now, my mom keeps calling me, telling me I need to make things right with Emma and that I'm causing family drama over something trivial. I've tried explaining that I just didn't appreciate the way Emma treated my home, but my mom doesn't seem to understand. My mom thinks I should apologize, even though I don't feel like I've done anything wrong. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she called my apartment filthy and unlivable. Or am I overreacting? Should I have just let her stay and taken the criticism? AITA for not helping my sister pay off her student loans? I, 29M, have a sister, Sarah, 27F, who I love dearly, but we've always had a bit of a complicated relationship. Growing up, I was always the responsible one in the family, and she was the free spirit. I excelled in school, went to a good college, and graduated with minimal debt. Sarah, on the other hand, was the life of the party. She was more interested in socializing than studying and ended up with a lot of student loans after graduating. I've always tried to be supportive of her, but over the years, it seems like she keeps making decisions that only make things worse for her financially, and I'm starting to get frustrated. Sarah graduated from college with a hefty amount of debt, around $50,000. And while that's not unusual for someone who attended a private university, she has made little effort to pay it off since then. Instead, she spent the next few years bouncing from one job to another, often not staying at any place long enough to get benefits or a decent salary. She also got into a couple of bad relationships, which I feel set her back even further. A few months ago, she called me out of the blue and asked if I could help her with her student loans. I knew she had been struggling, but I didn't know the full extent of it until she told me how much she still owed and how little she had been able to pay off. She was asking for $10,000 to put a serious dent in her debt and stop the interest from building up even more. She claimed she'd been doing everything she could, but nothing seemed to be working, and she was overwhelmed by the whole situation. Now, I'm not heartless, and I do want to help my sister. But the issue is, I've already helped her before, and it always seems like she's putting a Band-Aid on a bigger problem instead of tackling it head-on. I've given her small loans in the past, $500 here and there, to help with rent or bills when she was struggling, but they were never paid back, and that's where my frustration started to build. It was always something, whether it was a bad breakup or her needing a new phone. The money I gave her never seemed to have an impact on her overall financial situation. I was starting to wonder if she was really making an effort to improve her finances at all. I told her I couldn't help her out this time, and that's when things got complicated. Sarah immediately got upset and accused me of being selfish. She said that I had the money to help her, so why wouldn't I? It felt like she was implying that because I was in a better financial position, I should just give her what she needed. But I felt like it wasn't my responsibility to rescue her from the consequences of her own actions. I explained that while I could afford to give her the $10,000, it wasn't just about money. It was about her mindset. I wanted her to figure out a way to manage her finances on her own instead of relying on other people to solve her problems. She hadn't shown me that she was willing to take the necessary steps to fix her situation long term. She didn't have a stable job, hadn't looked into loan forgiveness programs, and wasn't even budgeting properly. My point was that I didn't want to perpetuate a cycle where I kept bailing her out, only for her to end up in the same position a few months later. I suggested she look into refinancing her loans, maybe talk to a financial advisor, or even take on a second job for a while. But she wasn't interested in that, and just kept pushing me to give her the money. The argument ended with Sarah saying that I didn't care about her and that I was lucky to have my life together while she was struggling. She said that I was acting like I was better than her, and it really hurt. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to make her feel inferior, but that I didn't want to enable her to keep avoiding responsibility for her own financial well-being. It's been a few weeks since that conversation, and our relationship has been strained. I still feel like I made the right choice, but I can't help but feel guilty. I want to help my sister, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of or be the solution to her every problem. I've offered advice, I've given her small loans in the past, and I've even helped her with job connections and networking, but it's never enough. I'm starting to feel like I'm being unfairly blamed for her situation when it's really her choices that have led to this point. She has refused to face the reality of her financial situation, and I don't want to enable that behavior by giving her a large sum of money that she might not use responsibly. So, AITA for not helping my sister with her student loans? AITA for refusing to let my parents use my house for their anniversary party? I, 31M, recently had a big disagreement with my parents, and it's been weighing heavily on me. It all started when they asked if they could use my house for their 30th wedding anniversary party. At first, I was a little taken aback because while I love them, they've never really been the kind of people to ask for help with anything like this. My parents are in their early 50s, and they've always been fairly independent. They live in a nice house, but it's not big enough to host a large event, and they've never had a reason to throw such a big party before. I had recently bought my house about 6 months ago. It's a modest 3-bedroom place with a decent-sized living room, a dining room, and a nice backyard. I've worked hard to get here. I saved for years, worked multiple jobs, and put in a lot of effort to make my home exactly what I wanted. It's not huge, but it's the first house I've ever owned, and it's an important achievement for me. When my parents first asked, I was hesitant. I told them that I wasn't sure about having a large event at my place, especially considering it was my first house, and I wanted to keep it as something personal. They didn't seem to understand at first, and they kept pressing, saying it would only be family, and they wouldn't be having a huge crowd. I explained to them that even though it might only be family, my house wasn't built for parties, and I wasn't sure if I was comfortable with it. They seemed to take it pretty hard, and they started guilt-tripping me. My mom especially said that they had always supported me, helped me with everything growing up, and that it would mean a lot to them if I'd help them out by hosting this one event. She even said, "This is a milestone in our lives, and you're not going to let us celebrate it?" My dad added that it wasn't a big deal and that they wouldn't make a mess or anything. But I still wasn't convinced. I reminded them that my house was small, and I didn't want it to get overcrowded or to have a bunch of people using my things. It's not like I had a separate dining room or a huge backyard for everyone to spread out. It's just a typical house in a suburban neighborhood, and I wasn't prepared to turn it into a venue for a party, even if it was just family. Plus, I had been planning to use the space for myself in the way I wanted, without worrying about cleaning up after other people or making sure everything was in perfect condition for a party. After I declined, my parents weren't happy. They kept pushing, even after I explained my reasons. My mom said, "I just don't understand why you're being so selfish. It's not like we're asking you for a huge favor." She also said that I wasn't appreciating how much they had done for me in the past. My dad, on the other hand, tried to downplay it by saying that if I didn't want to host, that was fine, but they would be disappointed. This is when things started to get a little more heated. I was getting frustrated, and I explained to them again that I wasn't refusing to help. I was just not comfortable with the idea of hosting a large event in my home. I told them I didn't want to be taken for granted, and I felt like they were putting me in an uncomfortable position by asking me to do something I didn't want to do. That's when my mom started telling me that I was being selfish and that it wasn't fair to keep something like this from them. She went as far as to say, "We've done everything for you your entire life, and now you can't even give us this one thing?" It really hurt because I've always tried to do right by my family, and I didn't feel like I was being unreasonable by wanting to maintain some boundaries with my personal space. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not wanting to give them what they wanted. It was about me being uncomfortable with the idea of hosting an event in my house when I wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. They kept pressing, and I could tell they were getting more upset with each refusal. Eventually, I just said, "I'm sorry, but I can't do it. I hope you understand." Since then, my parents have barely spoken to me. We've exchanged a few texts, but there's a noticeable tension. My mom sent me a message saying, "Thanks for ruining our anniversary celebration. We won't forget this." It stung, and I've felt really conflicted ever since. My wife, 30F, thinks I made the right decision because it's my house, and I shouldn't feel pressure to give in to something that makes me uncomfortable. But my friends are split. Some agree with me and say that I should have stuck to my boundaries, while others think I should have helped my parents out, especially given how much they've done for me over the years. It's been a couple of weeks, and I'm still feeling pretty down about the whole situation. I didn't want to upset my parents, but I also didn't want to feel like my space was being taken advantage of. I'm just not sure if I was too harsh or if I was right to stand my ground. So, AITA for refusing to let my parents use my house for their anniversary party. AITA for not wanting my best friend to be my maid of honor after she made fun of my weight loss journey. I, 29F, have been best friends with Hannah, 29F, since we were kids. We went through all the usual life stages together: grade school, high school, college, and now we both live in the same city. We've always been super close, and I've always considered her to be my person. When I got engaged a year ago, it was a no-brainer to ask her to be my maid of honor. She was thrilled and immediately began talking about how she was going to help plan everything, make sure everything was perfect, and throw me the best bachelorette party ever. Fast forward to a few months ago when I started my weight loss journey. For context, I've struggled with my weight for most of my adult life. I've tried various diets, gym routines, and even some extreme weight loss programs over the years, but I was never able to sustain the results. But something finally clicked for me last year, and I began eating healthier exercising regularly, and focusing on my mental health. I've lost 40 pounds so far, and I feel amazing. It hasn't been easy, but I'm proud of the progress I've made, and I feel like I'm finally in control of my body. When I first started losing weight, Hannah was super supportive. She would text me encouragement, tell me I looked great, and even suggested some workout classes for me to try. But after a while, things started to change. It started small. She would make comments like, "Oh, you're actually going to eat that?" Or, "Are you sure you're not overdoing it at the gym?" I shrugged them off because I thought maybe she was just concerned about me pushing myself too hard. However, over time, her comments started to feel more passive-aggressive. One day, we were having lunch, and I was talking about how I had made some progress with my fitness goals. I mentioned that I had lost a few more pounds and was really excited to see the changes in my body. Hannah made a face and said, "Well, losing weight won't solve all your problems, right? You're still going to have your emotional issues no matter what size you are." I was taken aback by this, but I tried to brush it off. I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. A couple of weeks later, I was telling her how happy I felt with my progress and how I was really starting to feel confident in my own skin. Hannah then made a joke, but it didn't feel like a joke at all. She said, "Yeah, it's like you're trying to erase all the years of being the fat friend, huh? It's kind of funny watching you go through this transformation. You're really determined to not be that person anymore, aren't you?" I froze. I know she was trying to be funny, but it stung. Hannah and I have always had a sense of humor, and we're both sarcastic, but I've never heard her say anything like that to me before. I told her that wasn't funny, and she brushed it off, saying, "Come on, I'm just messing with you. You're taking it too seriously." That's when I started noticing a shift in how she treated me. She would make comments about my new clothes, saying things like, "Well, that outfit is cute for someone who's not your size." Or, "Are you really sure you want to wear that? It's a little daring for someone who's used to hiding behind baggy clothes." I tried to tell myself that maybe she didn't mean to be hurtful, but it started to feel like she was trying to undermine my journey. A few weeks ago, I had a big breakthrough when I fit into a dress I'd been eyeing for months. It was a smaller size than I'd ever worn before, and I felt incredible. I texted Hannah to tell her how excited I was, and she responded with, "Wow, you really did it. I guess I'll have to find a dress to match my best friend now that you're all slim and gorgeous. Don't forget where you came from, though. Don't let all this weight loss go to your head." That comment hit me hard. I felt like she was implying that I was forgetting who I was and where I came from, and that somehow the progress I had made was something to be ashamed of. I tried talking to her about it, telling her that her comments were really starting to hurt my feelings. I explained that I had worked so hard to get where I am, and it felt like she was undermining my efforts. Instead of apologizing, Hannah got defensive. She said, "I'm just trying to remind you not to get too full of yourself. I don't want you to think you're better than anyone just because you've lost weight. People are going to start looking at you differently, and I just want to make sure you don't forget that." She also told me that I was being too sensitive and that I needed to lighten up and stop acting like I was the only person who had ever lost weight. At that point, I knew I had to make a tough decision. When I was planning my wedding, I still had her in mind for maid of honor, but after everything that had been happening, I didn't want her to have that role anymore. I couldn't have someone standing by my side who couldn't support me during one of the most important journeys of my life. I didn't want her in the spotlight of my wedding if she wasn't able to be genuinely happy for me. I told her that I had decided to ask someone else to be my maid of honor, someone who had been supportive throughout my weight loss journey and who truly believed in me. She was upset, and she texted me, saying, "Wow, really? I thought we were better than that. I can't believe you're letting this weight loss thing get in the way of our friendship. You're making it all about the weight when it's supposed to be about your happiness." I tried to explain that it wasn't just about the weight, but about how she had treated me and how her comments were affecting my mental health. She didn't respond after that, and now it's been a few weeks of silence. Our mutual friends are saying that I'm in the wrong for not giving her a second chance, and that I should just let it go. Some are even saying I'm overreacting and making drama over nothing. But at this point, I feel like I've made the right decision for myself. So, AITA for not wanting my best friend to be my maid of honor after she made fun of my weight loss journey and undermined my progress. AITA for kicking my best friend out after she destroyed my kitchen. 30F. have a best friend, Emma, 29F, who I've known for years. We've been through a lot together: school, bad breakups, job losses, and everything in between. We've always had a really close relationship, and she's essentially family to me. Emma's been living with me for the past 6 months, ever since her lease ended, and she didn't want to sign another one due to financial issues. I offered to let her stay with me temporarily while she got back on her feet, and she agreed. I thought it would be a short-term situation, but things have stretched out longer than expected. When Emma moved in, I made it clear that she'd need to pitch in for groceries and utilities, and that she should also be respectful of the space. My apartment is a modest 2-bedroom, and while I'm grateful for having a roommate to split rent with, I'm also very particular about keeping things neat. I've always been a bit of a neat freak, especially in the kitchen. I don't mind doing most of the cleaning myself, but I expect people to clean up after themselves and follow basic hygiene rules. We agreed on all of this when she moved in, and things seemed fine for the first few months. However, about a month ago, things started going downhill. Emma, who has always been a bit disorganized, started leaving her things all over the apartment. I didn't mind at first, but it started getting worse. She would leave dirty dishes in the sink for days, sometimes even weeks, and when I brought it up, she'd make excuses like, "I'm busy," or "I'll get to it later." I don't mind doing my share of chores, but I felt like I was doing 90% of the cleaning and cooking. When I tried to have a conversation with her about it, she'd agreed to do better, but nothing really changed. The tipping point came last week. I had spent the whole day cleaning the apartment, as I was expecting some friends over for dinner. I've always been the type to host gatherings, and I love cooking for people. The kitchen is my domain. It's where I feel the most comfortable, and I put a lot of effort into keeping it organized and stocked. When I got home from work that day, I found the kitchen in complete chaos. There were spilled ingredients all over the counter, flour on the floor, and several dirty dishes piled up. I don't mind the occasional mess if it's just from a meal, but this was something else entirely. Emma had decided to bake a cake without telling me, and not only had she left everything a mess, but she had also used all of the flour, sugar, and some of the ingredients I was planning to use for the dinner I was cooking for my friends. I was absolutely furious. I don't even know how she thought it was okay to use up my ingredients without asking, especially considering I told her a million times that the kitchen needed to be kept tidy and that we should always communicate about cooking and food. It felt like a blatant disregard for my space and my time. I confronted her about it, and she immediately got defensive. She claimed that she was just trying something new and didn't think it would be a big deal. When I pointed out that I had planned an entire dinner and had no backup ingredients, she barely apologized and instead said something along the lines of, "Well, I didn't think you'd be so upset over a cake." She even tried to laugh it off, like it was no big deal. I was done. I told her that this behavior wasn't okay, and that she needed to take responsibility for the mess she had caused. I also said that if she wasn't willing to respect the rules of the house and be more considerate, she needed to find somewhere else to stay. She became incredibly defensive and accused me of overreacting. I explained that this wasn't just about the mess. It was about the lack of respect and the ongoing disregard for the boundaries I had set. We'd had this conversation multiple times, and it was clear that she wasn't listening. Emma got really upset at this point, saying that I was being dramatic and acting like a control freak over something small. I calmly told her that I wasn't being dramatic. I was simply setting boundaries, and if she couldn't respect them, then maybe it was time for her to leave. She said she had nowhere else to go and that I was being an awful friend. I told her I understood that, but it wasn't fair for her to continue living in my space if she couldn't respect it. I even suggested that she look into short-term rentals or find a place with her friends, but she didn't want to hear it. In the heat of the moment, I told her to pack her things and leave. I know it was harsh, but I was so frustrated with the constant mess, the disrespect, and the lack of responsibility she was taking for her actions. I've always been there for Emma, but I don't think it's unreasonable to ask someone to respect your home and your space, especially when you've had repeated conversations about it. Emma left that evening, and I've heard nothing from her since. It's been almost a week, and I've been feeling a mix of emotions. I know I probably should have handled it better, but at the same time, I'm not sure what else I could have done. I tried talking to her. I tried being patient, and I even gave her multiple chances to improve her behavior. But she never seemed to take me seriously, and it eventually boiled over. I've been talking to some of our mutual friends about the situation, and some of them agree that I was in the right to set boundaries, while others think I overreacted and should have been more understanding. One of my friends even said that Emma is going through some personal stuff, and I should have been more compassionate. I get that, but at the same time, I'm not her therapist or her parent. I'm her friend, and I shouldn't have to put up with constant disrespect in my own home. So, AITA for kicking my best friend out after she destroyed my kitchen. AITA for asking my parents to pay for my dog's surgery after they promised to help, but backed out. I, 26F, have a dog named Max. He's a rescue I adopted 3 years ago when I was living on my own. I fell in love with him the second I saw him. Max is an old boy now, about 9 years old, but he's still full of energy and personality. He's my best friend, and we do everything together. A few weeks ago, Max started limping, and at first, I thought maybe he had just overexerted himself on our morning walk. He's always been active, so it didn't seem like anything too serious. But after a couple of days, the limping didn't go away, and he was visibly in pain. I took him to the vet, and after a series of tests and an x-ray, the vet confirmed that Max has a torn ligament in his back leg. The injury is severe enough that without surgery, Max will eventually lose full mobility in that leg and develop severe arthritis. The vet gave me the option of either going forward with surgery or managing the pain with medication, but the latter wouldn't guarantee that Max would have a good quality of life in the long term. I immediately opted for surgery because I want him to be able to run around like he used to. The problem, though, is that the surgery is expensive. It's about $3,500, which I just don't have at the moment. I'm not in debt or anything, but I've been working hard to save for a down payment on my own house, and I wasn't expecting to have to take on such a huge financial burden so suddenly. I didn't know what to do, so I reached out to my parents. I've always had a good relationship with them, and we've helped each other out in the past when things got tough. I wasn't asking for the full amount, but I did ask if they could contribute to the cost of the surgery. My mom is a nurse, and my dad works in finance, so I knew they had the means to help. They were initially really supportive and said they'd help me out, especially since they know how much Max means to me. They even said they'd contribute $2,000 of the total cost. I felt such relief. I could cover the rest of the cost and get Max the help he needed. After this conversation, I scheduled the surgery for the following week. But the day before the surgery was set to happen, I received a call from my mom. She told me that due to some unexpected financial issues with their house, specifically some repairs they needed to make, they were no longer able to give me the money they promised. I was shocked. I understand that financial situations can change, but I had already made arrangements for Max's surgery and was counting on their help. I asked her if there was any way they could still help, but she said it just wasn't possible anymore. She told me I should try to find another way to come up with the money, maybe through a loan or by asking other family members. I was devastated, but I didn't want to argue, so I just said I'd figure it out. I went ahead with the surgery the next day, but I ended up putting the entire cost on my credit card, which is going to take me quite a while to pay off. Max's surgery went well, and he's recovering nicely, but I'm still angry and frustrated. I can't shake the feeling that my parents broke their promise. They had told me they would help, and I was relying on that help. Now, I'm stuck with a mountain of debt and a lot of resentment. A few days ago, I called my parents to update them on Max's recovery, and they asked me how I was doing financially with the surgery costs. I told them the truth, that I had to put it all on my credit card, and it's going to be hard to pay off. They said they were sorry, but they really couldn't help out at all, and that I should just be more careful about how I spend money in the future. I tried to keep my cool, but I ended up snapping a little. I told them that it wasn't fair of them to back out after they had promised to help me, especially after I had already made plans based on their commitment. My mom got defensive and said that things had changed, and I shouldn't be so upset with them. My dad said that they had their own financial issues and couldn't be expected to cover everything. Now, the rest of the family is starting to get involved, and I'm being made to feel like I'm a bad guy. Some relatives think I should have never asked them for money in the first place, while others think I should just let it go and move on. My sister, in particular, thinks I'm overreacting and that my parents didn't actually promise anything, just offer to help, and that I'm being entitled for expecting them to keep their word. I feel torn. On one hand, I understand that my parents have their own financial obligations, and maybe they didn't anticipate needing to pull out of the promise. But on the other hand, I feel like they let me down, and I'm frustrated that I'm now dealing with all the financial strain on my own when they made me believe I wouldn't have to. AITA for being upset that my parents backed out on their promise to help me with Max's surgery. AITA for refusing to let my best friend bring her new boyfriend to my birthday party after he ghosted me when I was going through a tough time. I, 27F, have a best friend, Megan, 28F, and we've been inseparable since we were kids. We grew up together, went to the same school, and lived through a lot of the same experiences. We've always been there for each other, through the highs and the lows. I considered her more like a sister than a friend. A couple of months ago, Megan started dating this guy, Josh, 29M. I hadn't met him in person yet, but I had heard a lot about him. Megan would gush about him whenever we talked. At first, I was genuinely happy for her. She's always been a bit unlucky in the relationship department, so I was hoping this was finally the one. But as time went on, I started to feel like something was off. It wasn't anything she said directly, but I could tell that their relationship was moving pretty fast. It seemed like she was neglecting her friendships for him, and I didn't like that. For some context, over the past year, I had been going through some really tough stuff. My mom passed away from cancer, and I was struggling to cope with the loss. I leaned heavily on Megan during that time. She was there for me in ways that meant the world to me. She'd check in on me, come over to hang out when I was feeling really low, and just let me vent. I'll admit, I wasn't the easiest person to be around, but she never made me feel like I was a burden. Around the time Megan started getting serious with Josh, I had a particularly rough week. I was feeling incredibly lonely and down, and I reached out to Megan for some support. I needed her to come over and just hang out with me because I couldn't shake this feeling of isolation. I hadn't heard from her much in the days leading up to that, and I thought maybe she'd just been busy with Josh, but I still hoped she'd make time for me. When I texted her, she told me she couldn't come over because she was out with Josh. I completely understood that she had a new relationship, but I felt hurt because I had been there for her through every tough situation in her life, and I needed her too. I sent her a message explaining how I felt, saying that it hurt to be put on the back burner when I needed her most. She responded with a long message apologizing, but explained that she was trying to focus on Josh and their relationship because she didn't want to mess it up. She also mentioned that she had been really busy with work and didn't realize how much I was struggling. It was a lot to take in. The thing that stung the most, though, was when she told me that maybe I should just try to find a therapist instead of leaning on her as much. That comment really threw me. I didn't expect her to completely put everything else aside for me, but to feel like I wasn't even worth making time for her after everything we'd been through together was crushing. I didn't respond right away. I just let it sit with me for a while, trying to process everything. Fast forward a few weeks later, it's my birthday. I had been planning this party for a while, and I was really excited about it. I invited a bunch of friends, including Megan, of course. She RSVP'd right away and told me that she was bringing Josh along. I didn't know how I felt about that. On one hand, I was happy for her, and I wanted her to be able to bring whoever she wanted. On the other hand, I wasn't sure how I felt about Josh, especially after the way things had been between Megan and me lately. I hadn't even met the guy yet, and from the little I had heard, he sounded like the type who didn't really care about anyone but himself. The day of the party, Megan showed up with Josh, and it didn't take long for me to start feeling uncomfortable. Josh seemed nice enough on the surface, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was kind of aloof. He wasn't very friendly or engaging with anyone, and every time I tried to talk to him, he gave short responses. Megan was totally focused on him, barely interacting with me or anyone else. It was like she was trying to prove something. As the night went on, I could feel myself getting more and more frustrated. My best friend had completely neglected me again, and Josh was just sitting there, acting like he didn't care about anyone else at the party. At one point, I overheard Megan telling Josh about how she had basically been a therapist for me after my mom passed, and how I had expected so much from her. Hearing that really stung. I wasn't expecting her to be my therapist, but it felt like she was trying to justify abandoning me when I needed her the most. By the end of the night, I had had enough. I pulled Megan aside and told her that I didn't appreciate her bringing Josh to my birthday party, especially after everything that had happened between us. I told her that it felt like she was prioritizing him over me, and I didn't like how he seemed to make everything about himself while she ignored her friends. She seemed taken aback at first, then tried to brush it off by saying I was overreacting and being dramatic. She said that I needed to accept that she had a boyfriend now and that she couldn't be there for me the same way she had been before. I was upset, but I didn't want to cause a scene at my own party, so I just told her that I needed space from her. She left not long after that, and things have been tense between us ever since. I've been feeling really hurt and frustrated, and I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong here. I reached out a few times to talk things over, but she's been distant and hasn't made much of an effort to fix things. Now, some of our mutual friends are telling me I overreacted. They think that I shouldn't have made such a big deal about Josh coming to the party, and that Megan has every right to prioritize her relationship. But others agree with me, saying that Megan's behavior has been pretty inconsiderate. I've been questioning whether I was too harsh on her, especially since she's in a new relationship and might just be adjusting. But at the same time, it feels like I'm the one left hanging whenever she gets involved with someone new. So, AITA for refusing to let Megan bring Josh to my birthday party and for confronting her about how I've been feeling neglected. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for kicking my cousin out after she refused to clean up the mess she made. I, 27F, have a cousin, Sarah, 26F, who is like a sister to me. We grew up together, spent all our holidays and summers at our grandparents' house, and shared everything from clothes to secrets. We've always been super close, even though we have some differences in our personalities. I'm a bit more reserved, while she's always been the life of the party. Outgoing, spontaneous, and sometimes a little reckless. I love her to death, but we've had our fair share of disagreements over the years. A few months ago, Sarah reached out to me and asked if she could stay at my place for a couple of weeks. She had just gotten out of a toxic relationship and needed a place to crash while she figured out her next move. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment in the city, so space is tight, but I agreed to let her stay. I knew she was going through a tough time, and I didn't want to leave her stranded. The first few days went smoothly. Sarah was quiet, respectful, and seemed to appreciate the space I was offering her. She'd go out during the day for job interviews or meetups with friends, and I'd have the apartment to myself in the evenings. But things started to change after the first week. One evening, I came home from work to find the apartment a mess. There were empty snack bags on the couch, dishes piled up in the kitchen, and clothes scattered around the living room. I was immediately frustrated. I had mentioned multiple times that I like to keep things clean and that if she used anything, she should clean up after herself. At first, I let it slide, thinking maybe she was just going through a tough adjustment period, but it started to get worse. The next few days were more of the same. Sarah started leaving dirty dishes in the sink, not cleaning up after herself, and even leaving food out overnight. I had to repeatedly remind her to take care of her mess, but every time I did, she'd act like she didn't understand why I was so upset. She would apologize half-heartedly and promise to do better, but nothing changed. It became clear that she wasn't taking my request seriously. The breaking point came last weekend. I had invited a few of my close friends over for a dinner party to celebrate my promotion at work. I spent the whole day cleaning, cooking, and setting up. I had spent hours preparing everything, making sure the apartment was spotless and everything was in order. When my guests arrived, I was excited to show off the meal I had prepared. But when I opened the door, I was hit with an overwhelming smell of something burnt. I walked into the kitchen and saw that Sarah had been cooking without asking me and had completely ruined the stove. There was food everywhere, the pot was burned, and grease was splattered all over the counter. I was livid. I had explicitly told her in the past that if she wanted to cook, she needed to ask first and make sure she cleaned up afterward. I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't help it. I immediately told her she needed to clean it up, but she just shrugged and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mess it up. I'll clean it later." I explained that I didn't have time to clean up a mess right before my guests arrived, and that she needed to take responsibility for it now. She got defensive and said that she didn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of it. "It's just a little mess," she said. At that point, I completely lost it. I told her that it wasn't just a little mess. It was a huge mess, and it was disrespectful for her to ignore my rules and act like it wasn't her problem. I told her that she needed to clean it up right then and there. She started to argue with me, saying that I was being too uptight and that I should just relax. I was beyond frustrated at this point. I ended up asking her to leave, telling her that I couldn't keep living like this, with her ignoring my boundaries and treating my space with such disrespect. She was shocked, obviously. She tried to argue that I was being harsh, that I was overreacting, and that I shouldn't kick her out when she had nowhere else to go. I told her that I understood she was going through a tough time, but that didn't give her the right to treat me like this. I had let her stay with me because I cared about her, but I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace of mind and my home for the sake of her comfort. I offered to help her find a place to stay, but I told her that it was time for her to go. I packed up her things and let her leave. She left in tears, saying that she didn't know what she had done wrong and that she felt betrayed by me. I felt awful, but I also knew that I had to stand up for myself. Since then, we haven't spoken much. I've texted her a couple of times to check in, but she hasn't responded. Our mutual friends are divided. Some say that I did the right thing by setting boundaries and standing up for myself, but others think I overreacted and should have been more understanding of her situation. One friend even told me that I should have just let the mess slide because she was going through a breakup and needed the support. I've been feeling guilty ever since. I know I asked her to leave because I was frustrated, but part of me wonders if I should have tried to handle it differently. Did I overreact? Was I too harsh on her? I just don't know if I should reach out and apologize or if I was right to stick to my boundaries. So, AITA for kicking my cousin out after she refused to clean up the mess she made? AITA for calling out my brother's girlfriend after she criticized my parenting? I, 32F, have a 4-year-old daughter, Lily. She's a happy, energetic little girl, and I do my best to raise her in a loving, supportive environment. I'm a single mom, so I have to juggle work and parenting on my own, but I've always managed to make it work. My daughter and I are incredibly close, and while I may not have the luxury of a 2-parent household, I try to ensure she has everything she needs emotionally and physically. Recently, my brother, James, 28M, started dating a woman named Claire, 30F. They've been together for about 6 months, and while I haven't had many opportunities to spend time with her one-on-one, I've seen her at family gatherings. From the beginning, I felt like something was a little off with her, but I didn't want to be overly judgmental or make assumptions, especially since she's my brother's girlfriend. I figured I'd give her a chance. Everything came to a head last weekend when my brother invited me and Lily to dinner at his apartment. It was supposed to be a casual family get-together with him, Claire, and their roommate. Lily and I arrived a little early, and I immediately noticed how clean and organized their place was, which, honestly, made me feel a little self-conscious. I try to keep my apartment nice, but with a 4-year-old, things tend to get messy quickly. I didn't want to be overly critical, but I couldn't help but notice how pristine everything was at my brother's place. I wondered if Claire kept things that immaculate all the time, or if they tidied up just for us. The evening started out fine. We had some small talk, Lily played with the toy they had, and the dinner was great. But as the evening wore on, Claire started making little comments that, at first, I didn't think much of. She'd make jokes about my daughter's behavior, saying things like, "Wow, Lily sure is a handful." Or, "I'm not sure how you do it." I could never deal with a child that wild. Again, I didn't want to make a scene, so I tried to brush it off. But as the night continued, Claire's remarks became more pointed. At one point, Lily spilled some water on the floor, and I immediately grabbed a towel to clean it up. Claire looked at me and said, "Wow, you're not even going to make her clean that up herself? She's old enough to do it, you know. If I had a kid, I'd definitely be teaching them responsibility." I felt a pang of irritation, but kept quiet. Lily is still young, and I don't think a 4-year-old is responsible for cleaning up spills unless it's something simple that she could do on her own. I calmly said, "It's okay, Claire, I've got it. Lily is still learning, and I don't want to overwhelm her." Claire didn't seem to accept that. She gave me a look like I was spoiling my daughter or enabling her behavior. I felt really uncomfortable, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I tried to redirect the conversation. Later, when we were eating dessert, things got even worse. Claire turned to me and said, "I know you're a single mom, but don't you think it's time to start teaching Lily some discipline? I mean, I can tell she's really smart, but sometimes I wonder if she's just acting out because there's no consistent authority in her life." At this point, I couldn't take it anymore. I was hurt and frustrated. I told her, "I appreciate your concern, but I don't think it's fair for you to criticize my parenting when you don't have kids of your own. You don't know what it's like to balance everything on your own and try to raise a child to be kind, respectful, and independent." Claire immediately looked taken aback and said, "Well, I just thought maybe you'd be more strict with her. She's got a lot of energy, and I think it could be overwhelming for you if you don't set more boundaries." I replied, "Lily is a 4-year-old, Claire. She's supposed to have energy and curiosity. I'm doing my best to raise her with love and patience, not with the same rigid rules you might think are necessary. Every child is different, and I'm allowed to parent in the way that feels right for us." At this point, James, my brother, chimed in, trying to diffuse the tension. He told Claire to drop it, but it was clear that Claire was uncomfortable with my response. She excused herself to the bathroom, and James looked at me with a mix of concern and frustration. "I didn't think you'd go off on Claire like that," James said, his voice quiet but firm. I replied, "James, I don't know what you expected me to do. She's been criticizing me the whole night, and I wasn't going to sit there and let her make me feel like a bad parent." James sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I get it, but maybe you could have handled it differently. Claire just cares about you and Lily. She's trying to be helpful." I wasn't buying it. Helpful? By making me feel like I'm doing everything wrong? I don't need help from someone who has no experience with kids. When Claire came back from the bathroom, the mood had shifted. She seemed a little distant and didn't engage with Lily as much, and the rest of the evening felt awkward. We finished dinner quickly, and I told James the first was ready to leave. He didn't seem happy about it, but he didn't push me to stay longer. On the way home, I felt mixed emotions. I was angry, hurt, and exhausted from the whole evening. I've always prided myself on being a good mom, and I felt like Claire was attacking everything I've worked so hard to build with my daughter. The next day, I got a text from James saying that I needed to make up with Claire because she was upset by what had happened. He said she was just trying to offer advice, and that I shouldn't have gotten so defensive. He also mentioned that it's important to him that we all get along, and he didn't want this to cause problems in their relationship. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I don't know if I'm overreacting. I've always been the type of person to keep the peace, but I don't feel like I should have to tolerate someone criticizing my parenting, especially when they don't have kids themselves. So, AITA for calling out my brother's girlfriend after she criticized my parenting? Should I have let it go, or did I have the right to defend myself and my daughter? AITA for refusing to pay for my brother's medical bills after he lost his job? I, 29M, have an older brother, Jake, 34M, who has always been a bit of a wild card in the family. We were raised by our single mother, and while she worked hard to give us a good life, there were times when things were tough. Jake was the one who always seemed to struggle more than me. While I focused on my studies and tried to keep my life on track, he was often getting in trouble, whether it was with school, jobs, or relationships. He was the type of person who would have a great idea, but never really follow through, and it caused a lot of tension between us growing up. Fast forward to a few months ago, when Jake was diagnosed with a serious medical condition that required immediate and ongoing treatment. It was a huge shock to all of us, especially because, up until then, he had been in relatively good health. Jake had recently lost his job due to downsizing at the company where he worked, and the timing couldn't have been worse. He was in his mid-30s and was having a hard time finding another job in the field he'd been working in for years. His savings were nearly depleted, and he was relying on a small severance package to get by, which didn't last long. When the diagnosis came, Jake was understandably shaken. The medical bills piled up quickly, and the treatment costs were astronomical. He reached out to me for help, explaining that he didn't know how he was going to be able to afford the treatments, let alone pay for the prescriptions, doctor visits, and tests that were part of his ongoing care. He was already behind on his rent, and it didn't take long before he started asking if I could help him out financially. At first, I was willing to help. I have a good job, and while I don't have a ton of extra money, I could afford to give him some assistance. I paid for a few of his medical bills, as well as a couple of rent payments when he was in a tight spot. I didn't mind doing it first because I knew this was a tough time for him, and I wanted to be there for my brother. However, things started to get complicated after that. Jake kept asking for more money. At first, it was small amounts here and there, but then the requests started to grow. He wanted me to help pay for more of his treatments, his medications, and even things like gas money to get to his appointments. When I said I couldn't continue to cover everything, he became upset. He didn't understand why I couldn't just help him out since I had the means to do so. He told me that if I really cared about him, I would support him through this difficult time and that family should be there for each other no matter what. I explained to him that I had my own financial responsibilities to take care of. I have bills to pay, and I'm saving for a down payment on a house in the next couple of years. While I would help as much as I couldn't just give him unlimited support. I suggested that he look into financial assistance programs, charity organizations, or even explore other ways to manage his medical debt. But Jake refused. He said that he had already tried and that nothing had worked out. The situation started to strain our relationship. Jake would call me almost every day, asking for more money. Sometimes he would ask for small amounts, other times he would ask for hundreds of dollars at a time. He started to guilt-trip me, saying things like, "If you really cared about me, you wouldn't be so cold about this, or I've always been there for you. And now, when I really need you, you won't help me." It made me feel like I was being manipulated into giving him more than I was comfortable with. I reached a breaking point when Jake called me one evening and asked for $2,000 to cover some of his medical bills. He told me that if he didn't pay, they might stop his treatment, and he didn't know what else to do. I felt terrible for him, but I also knew that I couldn't afford to give him that much money. I explained that I couldn't help him with that amount, and that I had already given him everything I could. He snapped at me, saying that I was being selfish and that I was turning my back on him when he needed me the most. At this point, I began to feel really torn. I wanted to help him, but I also realized that I had been enabling him. He wasn't taking responsibility for his own financial situation. He had never made any serious effort to manage his money, and now he was expecting me to cover for him indefinitely. I also started to feel like my brother wasn't taking his health or financial situation seriously enough to make lasting changes. He had been out of work for months and had barely looked for a new job. Instead of cutting back on unnecessary spending, he kept asking for more and more. It seemed like he was relying on me to get him out of every tough situation, and I didn't think it was healthy for either of us. Eventually, I told Jake that I could no longer help him financially, at least not to the extent he was asking. I explained that I loved him and wanted to support him emotionally through this, but I couldn't afford to keep giving him money. He was furious. He accused me of being a bad brother, of not caring about him, and of abandoning him during the worst time of his life. He even said that if I didn't help him, he would never forgive me. Since then, we've barely spoken. My parents have been in the middle of this too, trying to mediate, but I can tell that they're siding more with Jake. They keep saying that I should just help him out, that I'm being too harsh. They've even suggested that I take out a loan to help him. But I feel like if I keep doing that, I'm just enabling his bad habits. I've tried to explain that to them, but they don't seem to get it. I feel guilty, but I also feel like I made the right decision. I've helped Jake as much as I can, but at some point, I need to prioritize my own future. I'm wondering if I'm being too hard on him or if he's genuinely expecting too much from me. So, AITA for refusing to pay for my brother's medical bills after he lost his job. AITA for not letting my friend move in with me after she lost her job. I, 28F, have a close friend, Emily, 29F, who I've known since college. We've always been there for each other through thick and thin, and our friendship has always been solid. That being said, over the years, I've started to notice some things about her that have made me feel uncomfortable at times. Despite her being highly intelligent and capable, Emily has never really been able to hold down a stable job. She's had several short-term gigs over the years, but has never been able to land anything long-term, and it's starting to affect her life in some pretty significant ways. Recently, Emily lost her latest job. She had been working as a marketing coordinator at a company for about 6 months, but they let her go due to budget cuts. I was really upset for her because I know how hard she worked to get that position, but at the same time, I wasn't entirely surprised. She'd always had trouble getting along with her coworkers, and she'd mentioned on multiple occasions that she felt underappreciated and had been struggling to keep up with the workload. After she lost her job, Emily called me in a panic. She explained that she was having trouble making rent and was afraid she might have to move back in with her parents, who live a few hours away. She said she'd been looking for jobs, but wasn't having any luck and didn't want to burden her family. After talking to her for a while, she asked if I would be open to letting her stay with me for a few weeks while she looked for new work. I've always been someone who values helping out my friends when they need it, and I've had people stay with me before, but this time I was a bit hesitant. The reason for my hesitation is that Emily has a history of relying on others for help, but not always following through on her responsibilities. In college, she would often ask for extensions on assignments or try to pass off her work to others. And as she's gotten older, that tendency has continued in different ways. She's always had a hard time sticking to deadlines and keeping promises, and while I've always tried to be supportive, it's felt like I've been the one carrying the weight when things go wrong. I explained to Emily that I wasn't sure it would be the best idea for her to move in with me. I told her that while I care about her and want to help, I wasn't sure if it was a good idea to put myself in a position where I'd have to support her financially or emotionally for an extended period of time. I also told her that I had a lot going on in my own life right now and that I didn't feel like I could handle the extra stress. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment, and it's not a huge space. I also work long hours and need peace and quiet when I get home to unwind. I just didn't feel like I was in a place to take on the responsibility of having someone else living with me for an indefinite amount of time. Emily was really upset when I told her no. She said she understood my point of view, but felt like I was abandoning her when she needed me most. She said that I was being selfish and that I wasn't considering how hard this situation was for her. She even said, "I thought you were my best friend. How can you turn your back on me like this?" That comment hit me hard because I do consider her a close friend, and I never want to hurt her, but I also knew that saying yes would be a mistake for both of us. After our conversation, things were really awkward for a few days. Emily didn't reach out to me, and I could tell she was hurt. I reached out to her a couple of times, trying to explain that I wasn't saying no because I didn't care about her, but because I didn't think it was the best situation for either of us. I suggested that she look into a few places she could rent temporarily or check out other options for living arrangements, but she didn't seem to want to hear it. Instead, she kept saying that I was the only person she could turn to and that I was making her feel like she didn't matter. Eventually, I decided to take a step back and give her some space. I felt like I had been as clear as possible, but it didn't seem like she was hearing me. I tried to be understanding of her situation, but I also knew that I couldn't let my own well-being and boundaries be compromised for the sake of someone else's comfort. A couple of weeks later, I ran into Emily at a mutual friend's birthday party. She barely acknowledged me at first and seemed distant, which made me feel even worse. After a while, she came over and said that she had been staying at a temporary rental place and was starting to look for work again. She thanked me for my help with advice, but she also mentioned that she felt like I had let her down by not being there for her in her time of need. She said that we weren't as close as we used to be, and that maybe I wasn't the friend she thought I was. At that point, I really started to question if I had made the right decision. I care about Emily deeply, and I don't want to lose her as a friend, but I also know that I need to protect my own mental health and space. I don't want to feel like I'm being taken advantage of, and I don't want to enable behavior that could hurt both of us in the long run. I started to wonder if I should have been more flexible and allowed her to stay with me, but at the same time, I know that I need to prioritize my own needs and comfort. Now, I'm left wondering if I made a mistake. I know that my decision was based on my own boundaries and what I thought was best for both of us, but I'm also heartbroken that it caused so much tension in our friendship. So, AITA for not letting my friend move in with me after she lost her job, AITA for kicking my friend out after she insulted my house and my cooking. I, 30F, have been friends with Lauren, 29F, for several years. We met in college and have stayed close ever since. Over the years, I've helped her through some tough situations, and I'd like to think I've always been a supportive and caring friend. We've had our disagreements, like any friendship, but I never expected things to get as heated as they did last weekend. It all started when Lauren asked if she could stay with me for a weekend. She was going through a rough patch in her personal life, and I was happy to offer her a place to stay for a few days. She lives in another city, so I don't get to see her often, but when I do, it's usually for a short visit. I thought this would be a great chance for us to catch up and spend some quality time together. When she arrived at my apartment, everything seemed fine at first. I have a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town, and while it's not the fanciest place, it's cozy, and I've worked hard to make it feel like home. I'm proud of it, even though it's a little smaller than I'd like. I'm also on a budget, so I don't have the latest appliances or furniture, but I take care of it, and I do my best to keep it clean and organized. Lauren seemed a little quiet when she first walked in, but I figured she was just tired from her trip. I made us both some coffee, and we sat down on the couch to chat. The first sign that something was off came when she asked, "Wow, is this all you have in here? It's kind of small, don't you think?" I was a little taken aback by the comment, but shrugged it off. I knew she was used to living in a larger apartment, so maybe she was just making an observation. I told her, yeah, it's small, but it works for me. I like the area, and the rent is reasonable. She didn't respond to that, but she gave the room a once-over and then said, "Well, it's just that. I don't know, everything feels a little outdated. Do you ever think about redecorating, or maybe getting some new furniture?" Now, I'm not someone who's overly sensitive about my living situation, but I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable. I didn't want to get into a discussion about how I'm not in the financial position to do a major renovation, so I just said, I try to make it work with what I have. It's not perfect, but it's mine, you know. Lauren just nodded, but I could tell she wasn't fully satisfied with that answer. We moved on to talk about other things, but I noticed she kept glancing around the apartment, as if evaluating everything. I thought maybe I was overthinking it, but the vibe was definitely off. The next day, I decided to cook us a nice dinner. I enjoy cooking, and it's one of my favorite ways to unwind after a long day. I made a simple but hearty pasta dish with a homemade sauce, garlic bread, and a side salad. It wasn't anything fancy, but I thought it would be a nice treat. I asked Lauren if she wanted to help, but she declined, saying she wasn't much of a cook. That was fine with me. I was used to cooking solo. When I served the meal, Lauren didn't immediately start eating. Instead, she looked at the plate with a raised eyebrow and said, "This is what you're making for dinner? It looks kind of basic." I was stunned. I'm not a gourmet chef, but I thought the meal was decent. I told her, "It's a simple pasta dish, but I promise it's good. I made it plenty of times before." She hesitated, then took a bite. After a moment of silence, she said, "I mean, it's fine, I guess, but it's kind of bland. Maybe you should try using more spices next time. This tastes like something you'd make when you're really short on time or don't know what to make." At that point, I was getting frustrated. I understand that not everyone has the same taste when it comes to food, but I put time and effort into that meal. I wasn't asking for her to praise it like it was a five-star dish, but her blunt critique was starting to feel really rude. I tried to keep my cool and said, "Well, I'm sorry you don't like it, but this is something I enjoy making. I'll take your feedback into account for next time." Lauren then smirked and said, "Honestly, I'm just surprised you didn't order takeout. Seems like that would have been a better option for you." That was the last straw. I've had enough of her criticizing not only my home, but now my cooking. I could feel my temper flaring, but I tried to keep my voice steady as I said, "Lauren, that's enough. I get that you might not like the meal, but I put effort into it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to keep commenting on it. This isn't a restaurant, and I'm not here to impress you with my cooking skills." She immediately got defensive and said, "I'm just saying, it's a little disappointing. I mean, you've been living here for years, and this is the best you can do? It's not even about the food. It's just that everything about this place is kind of sad. Don't you want more for yourself?" I was shocked by how condescending she was being. At this point, I was beyond frustrated. I didn't want to keep having this conversation, especially with someone who wasn't even being remotely supportive. I stood up, cleared my plate, and told her, "Lauren, I think it's best if you go. I can't keep hosting you when all you've done is criticize my home and my cooking. This is not how I expected this weekend to go, and frankly, I'm done." Lauren looked at me like I was the crazy one and said, "Are you seriously kicking me out over some criticism?" It's not like I said anything that harsh. I was firm with my response. Yes, I am kicking you out. I've been nothing but hospitable to you, and all you've done is make me feel bad about myself. I don't need that energy in my life. Please pack your things and leave. Lauren didn't argue further, and she left a few minutes later. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I know it was harsh to ask her to leave, but I also knew that I couldn't let her continue to insult me and my home. I felt like she crossed the line, and I wasn't going to tolerate it. The next day, I got a text from Lauren saying that I was overreacting and that she didn't think she had said anything that bad. She told me that I couldn't take a joke and that I should loosen up. She also said that she was disappointed in me for not handling the situation better and that she was done trying to be friends if I was going to be so sensitive. Since then, I've been questioning whether I overreacted. Some of my other friends think I did the right thing by standing up for myself, but others think I should have been more patient with her and let the comments slide. I'm torn, but I just couldn't let her continue to insult me and my efforts. So, AITA for kicking my friend out after she insulted my house and my cooking. AITA for refusing to let my friend bring her dog to my apartment after she agreed not to. I, 27F, have a friend, Jenna, 28F, who I've known since college. We've been through a lot together, shared late-night study sessions, wild parties, and countless heart-to-heart talks. Despite the fact that we're both quite different in many ways, we've always had a strong friendship, and I've always supported her when she needed me. She's the type of person who is always very enthusiastic about her passions, but sometimes she doesn't always think things through or take others into consideration. A few months ago, Jenna went through a tough breakup. It hit her pretty hard, and she moved out of her apartment and into a temporary place with her cousin. She mentioned she was planning to find a new apartment soon, but didn't have a place lined up yet. I've always offered her a place to stay when she needs it, so when she reached out and asked if she could stay in my apartment for a week or two, I agreed without hesitation. However, there was one condition I made clear to her. I didn't want her dog, Rex, coming with her. Rex is a medium-sized, very energetic dog that is also a bit destructive when he's not properly exercised. Jenna and I have different lifestyles. While she loves taking Rex out on long walks and playing with him, I'm a lot more relaxed and spend most of my time either working or doing personal projects. I told her up front that I wasn't comfortable with having a dog in my apartment. It's not that I don't like dogs, but my apartment is small and I don't have the time or energy to take care of one. I also have some allergies, so having Rex around would likely make things uncomfortable for me. Jenna agreed. She understood my position and said that she would find someone to watch Rex while she stayed with me. She assured me multiple times that she wouldn't bring him, and I trusted her. Fast forward a few weeks later, and she moved in with all her things. It was a bit of a tight fit, but I didn't mind. It was only temporary, after all. Everything was fine for the first few days, but then things started to change. Jenna mentioned more than once that she missed Rex and that she was feeling guilty about leaving him with a friend. I sympathized with her. She'd had Rex for years, and I could imagine how difficult it must be to be apart from him for so long. But I still wasn't comfortable with him coming over, especially with the understanding that we had set in the beginning. One evening, I came home from work to find Jenna sitting on the couch with Rex. I was immediately taken aback. My heart sank. The moment I walked in, Jenna looked at me and said, "I hope you don't mind. I know you said no dogs, but I really needed him here for a bit. I'll make sure he stays out of your way." She said it casually, as though it was no big deal. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. I reminded her that we had discussed this before she moved in, and I was very clear about my boundaries. I explained that I wasn't okay with Rex being there, especially when I had already made it clear I wasn't comfortable. Jenna seemed a little taken aback, but apologized and said she would take him to her cousin's place the next day. I thought the issue was resolved, but I was wrong. The next day, I came home to find Rex again. At this point, I was getting frustrated. Jenna was sitting on the couch, petting him and acting as though everything was fine. I asked her, "Why is he still here? I thought we talked about this." She shrugged and said, "I know, but he's been so lonely without me. I'm just trying to give him some attention." I told her that it wasn't fair to me or my space. I wasn't allergic to Rex, but his constant shedding was making it uncomfortable for me. Plus, his energy level was way more than I could handle, and I didn't want to deal with him running around the apartment or chewing on things. I also felt like she wasn't respecting my home. I explained that this wasn't about me not liking Rex. It was about her breaking the agreement we had. Jenna didn't seem to understand why I was so upset. She tried to argue that Rex was like family and that I should understand how important he was to her. I agreed that he was important to her, but I didn't think that meant I had to sacrifice my comfort and space. I didn't want to sound like I didn't care about her or her feelings, but I couldn't let her take advantage of my hospitality like this. The next day, I came home to find that not only was Rex still there, but Jenna had also left some of his things around the apartment: his bed, his food bowls, and a pile of chew toys. I was fed up at this point. I told her that I needed her to take Rex back to her cousin's place, or I'd have to ask her to leave. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock, and said, "Are you serious? You're going to kick me out over a dog?" I told her that it wasn't just about the dog. It was about the trust and agreement we had in place. I reminded her that she had agreed not to bring him, and I was already being more than generous by letting her stay with me. At this point, I felt like she was being disrespectful of my boundaries, and I didn't want to put up with it anymore. Jenna was clearly upset, but she didn't apologize. She said that if I was really going to make her choose between Rex and me, then maybe it was time for her to find another place to stay. I was heartbroken, but I knew I couldn't back down. I had already compromised by letting her stay, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my own comfort. She left the next day, and since then, we haven't spoken much. I know she's hurt, and I feel bad, but I also don't think I did anything wrong. I set clear boundaries, and she chose to disregard them. Some of my friends say I was too hard on her, that I should have been more understanding of her situation, but others agree that I was right to stand my ground. They say I shouldn't have to compromise my own well-being just because she was going through a tough time. I keep thinking about it, and I wonder if I could have handled things better. Maybe I could have been more patient, or maybe I could have let her stay with Rex just for a little while longer. But ultimately, I think I did what was best for me. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend bring her dog to my apartment after she agreed not to. AITA for kicking out my sister after she secretly invited her ex to my house during my birthday celebration. I, 30F, have a younger sister, Clara, 27F, who has always had a bit of a complicated relationship with me. Growing up, we didn't always get along, but after moving out and becoming adults, we managed to put aside our differences and become pretty close. We even started sharing things more, and I thought we were in a good place. A few weeks ago, I decided to throw a big birthday party for myself. I was turning 30, and I wanted to celebrate in style. I've never been one to have small get-togethers, so I booked a venue, hired a DJ, and invited a bunch of people, including close family and friends. I wanted it to be a big, fun night with people I care about. As part of the planning process, I reached out to Clara to check if she was coming and if she needed any help with finding a dress or anything like that. She told me she was excited to come, but had one request, that she be allowed to invite her ex-boyfriend, Mark, 29M, to the party. At first, I was surprised because Clara and Mark broke up about 6 months ago after a messy, emotional breakup. They had been together for 4 years, and the breakup was pretty devastating for Clara. She was a wreck for months, and I tried to be there for her, but it was hard because she kept going back and forth between wanting to move on and trying to stay friends with him. I was a little uncomfortable with the idea of having Mark at my birthday party, especially because it was still so fresh. The breakup hadn't been amicable, and even though Clara said they were fine now, I didn't think it was the best idea to mix exes, especially when Clara had been so emotionally affected by the relationship. However, I didn't want to upset her, and I figured if she really felt comfortable with it, then it was her choice. I agreed, with the understanding that there wouldn't be any drama and that Clara would make sure the situation wouldn't be awkward for anyone. Fast forward to the day of the party. Everything was going smoothly. The venue looked great, the music was playing, and people were having a good time. I hadn't seen Clara or Mark yet, but I wasn't worried. I just assumed they would show up at some point. At about 8 p.m., I was mingling with a few friends when Clara arrived, but she didn't come alone. She walked in with Mark right behind her. They were holding hands. I was absolutely stunned. My first instinct was to approach them and ask what was going on, but I didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone. I was trying to keep it together, but inside I was livid. I had specifically told her that I didn't want any drama, and yet here she was, acting like nothing had happened. I pulled Clara aside and asked her what was going on. She seemed confused by my reaction and said, "What's the big deal? He's my friend now. It's fine." I told her that it wasn't fine with me, that this was my birthday, and I didn't want to deal with any unresolved tension between her and Mark. She assured me that everything was okay between them and that they were just friends now, but I didn't believe her. I told her that I was uncomfortable with the situation and that if she wanted Mark there, she was going to have to leave. She didn't take it well. She got upset and started arguing with me in front of other guests, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best choice I made, but I was just so angry and disappointed. I calmly told her that I had made it clear from the beginning that I didn't want any unnecessary drama on my birthday, and having her ex-boyfriend show up like this was a huge red flag for me. I asked her to choose. Either he leaves or she does. At this point, people were starting to notice what was happening, and some of my friends were giving me concerned looks. I could feel the pressure building. Clara was clearly upset, and she started raising her voice. She accused me of being controlling and selfish, saying I should just let her live her life and not make everything about me. I stood firm, telling her that I wasn't asking her to cut him out of her life, but I was asking her to respect my wishes for one night, especially after everything I'd done to make this party a success. It was my birthday, and I didn't want to feel uncomfortable in my own celebration. Clara looked at me for a few moments, visibly torn, and then she turned to Mark, told him they should leave, and stormed out of the venue. The party atmosphere immediately shifted. Some of my friends were uncomfortable because they knew about the tension, and a few of them said I was wrong for kicking her out over something so small. Others, however, said I was in the right and that I shouldn't have had to deal with her drama at my party. But what really hurt was how my parents reacted. My mom pulled me aside afterward and told me that I had overreacted and that I should have been more understanding of Clara's feelings. She said that it was clear Clara was trying to move on, and I shouldn't have put her in that position. My dad was more on my side, but he didn't want to get involved in the drama, so he kept quiet for most of the evening. Since the party, Clara hasn't spoken to me much. She sent me a text the day after saying I was being a terrible sister and that I humiliated her in front of all our friends. She told me she was done trying to have a relationship with me and that I had ruined her life by making such a big deal about nothing. I tried to reach out to her, but she hasn't responded. Our parents have also been silent on the matter, and I feel like I've lost my sister over this. Now I'm torn. I feel like I had every right to ask Clara not to bring Mark and to stick to the boundaries I set for my party. But I also feel guilty because I didn't want to hurt her feelings, and I know how much she's been through with the breakup. Was I wrong for kicking her out of my birthday celebration over this? Am I the asshole for standing my ground? Or should I have let it go and allowed her to bring Mark? AITA for making my best friend choose between me and her new boyfriend? For context, I, 28F, have been best friends with Emily, 28F, since we were kids. We grew up together, and even when we went to different colleges, we kept in touch. We both moved to the same city after graduation, and we spent a lot of time together. She's basically my sister, and I trust her with everything. Over the years, we've been through a lot: breakups, job changes, family drama, and we've always been there for each other. About 6 months ago, Emily met a guy, Jake, 29M, through a mutual friend. At first, I didn't think much of it. She's been on a few dates here and there, but none of the guys she met seemed to be the right one for her. She's had some bad luck with relationships in the past, and honestly, I think I've been a little protective of her, knowing how vulnerable she can get when it comes to guys. When Jake entered the picture, Emily seemed really happy, and for the first time in a while, I saw her glow. He was charming, funny, and he really seemed to get her. However, there were a few things that started to bother me as I spent more time around him. First, he was extremely possessive. It wasn't like he was openly controlling, but I noticed how he always had to know where she was or who she was with. At first, it didn't seem like a huge deal. Maybe he was just a little insecure. But then, it started to affect our friendship. Emily would cancel plans with me to spend time with him, or if we made plans, she'd cut them short if he called. There was one time we had a girls' night planned, and she canceled last minute because Jake was having a bad day and needed her. I understood that she wanted to be there for him, but this wasn't the first time, and I couldn't help but feel like I was being pushed aside. What really set me off, though, was the way Jake treated me when we were all hanging out. The first time we all went out to dinner together, I could tell he was trying to make me feel uncomfortable. He'd make little comments like, "I don't know how you two are still friends. You seem so different," or, "You must be jealous of Emily finding someone like me." I laughed it off at first, thinking he was just trying to joke around, but after a few more times, it became clear he was undermining our friendship. It was subtle, but it felt like he was trying to drive a wedge between us. The last straw was a couple of weeks ago when Emily invited me to a party she and Jake were hosting. I hadn't seen her in a while because of how much time she was spending with him, so I was excited to catch up. But when I got there, I could tell something was off. Jake was practically glued to her side, and when I tried to talk to Emily, he would interrupt or make sarcastic comments. At one point, he even said, "Maybe you should just let Emily and me hang out alone. You know, since you've been so needy lately." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I tried to pull Emily aside to talk to her about it, but she just brushed me off. She said I was overreacting and that Jake didn't mean anything by it. But I couldn't ignore the fact that her relationship with him was slowly eroding our friendship. It felt like she was choosing him over me, and it was breaking my heart. I didn't know how to handle it anymore. So I made a decision that in hindsight might have been a little extreme. I called Emily and told her that I needed her to choose between me and Jake. I told her that I felt like I was being sidelined in her life, and I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I told her that I wasn't going to keep being friends with someone who was letting a guy walk all over me, and that I wasn't going to put myself through it anymore. Emily was shocked and hurt. She told me that I was being unreasonable and that I couldn't just demand her choose. She said I was being selfish and that I was trying to control her relationship. We argued for a while, but in the end, she said that she couldn't choose. She said that she loved me as her best friend, but she also loved Jake, and she wasn't willing to lose either of us. I was upset, but I respected her decision. However, since then, things have been extremely awkward between us. We've barely talked, and when we do, it feels forced. I miss the way things used to be, but at the same time, I feel like I had to take a stand for myself. I know I might have been too harsh, but I feel like I was being pushed aside for someone who didn't respect our friendship. Now, I'm wondering if I did the right thing. Maybe I should have just accepted that she was in a relationship and learned to deal with it. I don't want to lose her, but I also don't want to keep putting up with someone who treats me like an afterthought. So, AITA for making my best friend choose between me and her boyfriend. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.